Welcome to the Legal Leaders Podcast, brought to you by InView, LawView's community for in-house legal professionals, where we dive into the heart of the legal profession to bring you unfiltered discussions with industry titans on a broad spectrum of topics.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Legal Leaders Podcast. My name is Emma, and I'm your host today. I am joined by Seshani Bala. Seshani is the General Counsel at KPMG, and today we're going to be talking all about the way that you can thrive in tough times. It's no secret that we're in really difficult times at the moment, and Seshani is going to be sharing with us some of her key tips for thriving in these times and the mindset shift to do less but do better. So we're going to be talking about that, and we're also going to touch on the human AI synergy. So some really interesting topics. I'm really excited to get into this one, but I would love to hand over to you, Seshani, and if you could tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and your journey to your current position as GC at KPMG.
Sure, thank you, Emma. So I am General Counsel at KPMG in New Zealand. So I originally started out my career in private practice, went in-house about 10 years ago. Love being in-house, love helping businesses solve problems and just working with such a wide range of stakeholders. I moved back to New Zealand about almost 3 years, actually, in December, 3 years ago from Australia. So I was in Australia for 14 years. And I've just been kind of settling in, and I really love kind of the breadth of work that you get in-house here, and really interesting times we're going into. I think it will have an impact on in-house lawyers, so looking forward to see where we all get to in 2024.
Yeah. Oh no, that's so cool. And I guess the time that you've spent in-house, have you kind of stayed within a similar industry, or have you moved around a little bit?
I've moved around quite a bit. So I started out, my background's a private equity lawyer. Then I moved in-house into professional services, FMCG, for quite a long time. So did a lot of international FMCG work, then technology, and now back in professional services.
Oh, wow. That's cool. And I can imagine quite different industries, and you would have gained so many other skills along the way, even though the in-house role in a way would have been, I mean, maybe it wasn't similar, maybe it was quite different, but I'm sure there would have been a lot of skills that you learnt along the way. So during that time that you've spent in-house, you would have seen a lot of change from the legal profession, from the kind of economic environment that we're in. What have been some strategies or mindsets that have helped you and your team during times like we're in at the moment, where things are a bit tough out there?
Yeah, great question. So I think I started working during the GFC, and COVID and pandemics, and now sort of we're here where there's a lot of talk about recessions and the like. I think changing mindsets is so important. The economy will always be cyclical, and it's always going to be peaks and troughs. So you've got to be in it for the long game. But there's definite skills you need to adopt in tougher times. And one really big one that I work on with my team is just reframing mindsets to think differently and adapt. And by that, I mean redesigning what you do, why you do it, and really checking in with, is that what we should be doing? Is that what the business wants in these times? Is it adding value? And adding tangible value where you're helping a business execute in a dynamic environment where everything's changing, the goals are changing, the KPIs keep changing, the budgets are fluctuating. It's a lot of stress to be dealing with, but without having sort of that really adaptable mindset, it compounds and it becomes too much to deal with. So reframing things and being able to kind of pivot at pace and going, that's actually what we have to do now. We have to be able to rapidly change direction, catch things as they come. We're constantly, going, what do we stop? What do we start? What do we continue? Is adding value right now?
Yeah, that's so interesting, and it's such a good way to think about it as well, because again, it's that, there's only so much you can control when there's all these external factors that are changing and putting pressure on the team and the business, and it's what can you control within your team as well. As a leader, as a legal leader, what do you think is kind of, how do you create, I guess, not create it, but how do you give your team reassurance when we are in these really difficult times?
I think it's incumbent on leaders, and it's not easy, but you have to bring the vision, particularly when you're trying to help people navigate through murky waters, and you have to be the tide that lifts. So you've got to have the vision, you've got to communicate and articulate that clearly. You've got to give, the people you're leading something they can feel, touch, see, and buy into. because successful sort of, transformation and change management comes down to winning hearts and minds. So if you're not clear on that and you can't articulate it, you can't influence others to follow you and go on that journey, because people will only follow if they believe it. So I think that's really important, because you have to motivate, you have to inspire, and it's hard to do when you're obviously feeling the pressure yourself at times, and it's a balance. I do think that one really important thing we do as a team is, you have to laugh together. I always say teams that laugh together thrive together. We do serious work. You don't have to be serious all the time, but having a sense of humour and seeing the lighter side of things is your lifeline, because we know that this too will pass. We've all seen really difficult times, really good times, but keeping sight of the long goal, and just focusing on the people that you're trying to lead.
I really like that. It's so important. I think we all could laugh a little bit more. It feels good. There's so much research that's been shown just like how the benefit of just laughing, and I think it's just like the most simple thing that you can do as well.
Best medicine.
Absolutely. And so I guess, what does that look like for your team at the moment in terms of, it's a tougher economic climate out there. What are the sort of tasks, and obviously you can't go into a lot of detail, but what are sort of the things that you are prioritizing within your team from a work sense?
I think, we're always looking at how do you do things not just efficiently, but effectively. I think, I love that Peter Drucker quote, which says, the most useless thing you can do is efficiently doing unimportant things. And I think a lot of lawyers generally, just because of our training and we've been taught to do things one way, we often focus on just doing a lot of volume really efficiently without going, should we be doing that at all? Should someone else be doing that? Is there a better way to do it? And why are we doing it? And does the business want us to do it? Do they care? So knowing your business's strategy really tightly, being really kind of crisp on how are we helping the business execute strategy. And by that, I mean giving legal advice in a silo is really unhelpful to most businesses. You need to be a business problem solver. Legal is one voice at the exec table, and we need to come with a whole bunch of solutions, a whole bunch of ideas, be able to help them work cohesively with your C-suite and your stakeholders to solve a problem. So we're very problem-solving focused. And how do we get to the solution? What are the options? What's the best business reason to do this? That's really important.
I love the point you make that, like, what's the point in like making this process super efficient and streamlined if the business don't even care about it? Like, you've just, like, that's such a, like, yeah, why would you bother? Like, all that time and effort, and it's not even a priority, or, it could be great what you've done, but it's not even a priority for the business. How do you, I guess, how do you approach risk and decision making in these times? Like, does it change for you compared to more stable periods, or how does that dynamic change?
I think in really stable periods, you have the luxury of time that you don't always have in tougher climates. So when things are tough, I think you have to make often complex decisions amongst a lot of noise with imperfect information in a really in time constraints. So I'm always looking at, having the best data available at that point in time, being really effective with constant risk monitoring, because it changes constantly. Being able to know your business's risk tolerance and risk resilience, because if you do make the wrong call, which might be the best decision at the time, but it might not be, in hindsight, it might be the wrong call, how quickly can your business recover from that? So are there contingency plans? Have you done scenario planning? I think when times are, easier, it's so important for legal teams to drive them and be proactive about doing scenario planning. When I look back at sort of the pandemic, before that I was in a professional services and regulated higher education business. And we had to move, all our exams online in a couple of weeks globally.
Wow.
And when I look back at, what we were dealing with and how, as an exec team, we managed to do that, it was because we had invested in scenario planning. We knew the risk resilience. We knew what our business stress points were. We knew what was going to stress the model and where we could pull levers. And pandemics wasn't a consideration in that scenario bucket. But we had done enough option planning to know where our strengths and weaknesses were and how we could pivot. So that was so vital. And my biggest lesson there was, foresight and having challenging and often uncomfortable conversations, when you could choose not to, you could choose to just, it's not an issue right now, really comes back to save you later.
Yeah. I hadn't thought that we would talk about the COVID pandemic today, but the point that you made there, and I guess you've kind of hinted at your biggest learning, but is that for you what came out of that time, was that you've learnt or you've mastered more how to have those difficult conversations? Like, would that be your biggest learning through that time?
I think
Or is
so.
there something else?
I think communication. I think, over communicating all the time, being really authentic and transparent with what you do know and what you don't know. I think that creates psychological safety. When I look back to the time, it was such a heightened stress factor because we just didn't know what to do. Everything was unknown. And as a leader, you have to be able to communicate authentically and say what you don't know as well. I can tell you this, I don't know this. We're watching it every day. It's unfolding. But that helps build trust. And I think for any business, it's people at its center, you've got people at your core. You have to build that trust to be able to get optimized outcomes. And that was probably my biggest learning.
Yeah, wow. It's fun. It feels like a lifetime ago, but really it wasn't. It was a few years now. When we initially spoke, and I know this was something that you were really keen to talk about, was the concept of doing less but doing it better. There's a lot of people saying that we need to do more with less, and you kind of just want to shut that down. So I would love for you to talk a little bit about this mindset shift, and how, I guess, might seem a bit counterintuitive to we need to do more, we need to do more, which we see everywhere and everyone talks about. But you're saying let's do less but do it better.
Yeah, and I think if I unpack that a little bit, I think when we talk about doing more with less, it's not sustainable, right? It's not sustainable for people. It's not sustainable as a business model because all you do is you focus on efficiency, often at the cost of everything else. So you create a really brittle environment, which on the surface might look okay, but you're stripping everything back. So when something breaks, it's going to shatter with very little cushion the impact. And we're seeing the consequences of that just from, HR perspectives. It causes mental health problems. It causes a whole bunch of things just in the workforce in general. So when I say doing less and doing better, I think it's really about working smarter. It's using technology to drive scale. It's stopping doing things that are not important. It's redesigning why we're doing it and kind of breaking that it's always been done this way mindset, which is one of my least favorite things to hear. When you start doing all of that and you realize that everything's up for debate, you should be questioning everything. You actually create space to focus on what is really important to drive change and to drive transformation. So I think it's so important to stop and kind of step away from that busyness and the noise that we find ourselves in, to find that deep thinking time. I was speaking to another GC, and he said to me, I'm just so busy at the moment. I can't look at all this AI stuff until next year. That's on the radar for next year because I'm so busy. We're just drowning and fighting fires. And I completely get that because, over the course of my career and all businesses I've worked in, I've often felt like that. You're firefighting, you don't have thinking time. But the cost of not changing track, the cost of not upskilling and adapting and seeing how the market's going is very high. So I always, say to people, the cost of inaction, if you actually measure that cost, can you deal with that? It makes more sense to find time to refocus rather than just kind of doing what we're doing and kind of being on that hamster wheel.
Yeah, it's a tough one, isn't it? Because it's and I can, you've not acknowledged it well. There's been points at your career where it seemed impossible to step away and give yourself that space to think. So what do you think has changed for you to create the space to do that? Like, how do you do that in practice now?
I've learned, I'm still work in progress. I wouldn't say I'm doing it fantastically, but I've learned that you have to ruthlessly prioritize doing what's really important. And what's really important for the business is what's really important for you as an individual, how it aligns to your values. Like if you're burnt out and completely stressed out and you're not going to be a good leader, you're not going to be there for your team or for anyone else. So you have to kind of, put your own oxygen mask on first. I think it's prioritizing the non-negotiables. We all need sleep, exercise, nutrition. Those are the big rocks that have to go into your job before anything else. And then from there, it's really going, okay, what's my business strategy? What are the top 3, top 5 critical things I have to do? And how do I do even, 1% or 10% of that every day? So that's not because, we all know about the power of micro improvements. They have a big impact, over the course of time. So focusing on that and letting other things not necessarily drop, but having open, courageous conversations, with your business on, this is why we're stopping this is why we're starting it, and this is what's in it for you, and this is how it will feel for you, but this is the long-term goal that you want. And the conversation then changes very quickly to, okay, you're actually doing what we need, as opposed to just doing what's always been done, which is actually not good for anyone long term. So I think it's having those courageous conversations early, being able to articulate the why, getting buy-in to do that, because you can't just stop everything and find deep critical thinking time. But I think taking everyone on that journey, and so I've learned to be better at communicating that. And then it's actually really surprising that when you say that to people, they're like, we completely want you doing that. We want you spending time on the most strategic, complex stuff. We don't want you doing other stuff. But I think oftentimes when you're in it, it's like the frog in hot water. You don't know how to get out of it. You don't know how to change course. And what I've always found really helpful is, reaching out and speaking to your colleagues, your in-house contacts, your mentors, your coaches, because they can bring sometimes a very different perspective that you don't see at a point in time when you're just dealing with the day-to-day.
That's so, so true. How do you feel that has technology played a part for you in that as well? Like being able to embrace technology for maybe that more volume work that doesn't require that strategic thinking. Like, has that helped your team, I guess, create some space?
Hugely. I don't think I could do my current role without technology. Like, it would be impossible because there just aren't enough hours in the day. It helps prioritization. It helps. We use technology for intake, for contract management, for it, literally most things. I'm always going, is there a tech solution that can do this better, that can reduce time, that can take us out of the loop, that can help the business self-service, that can, drive efficiency, also generate value. So without all the tools we have, I couldn't do my role. And
wow.
I'm always encouraging, the lawyers on my team, particularly if you've come from a team that's not very tech heavy, or you've come from, more traditional kind of ways of working, learn your business's tech stack, use it. One that gives you credibility with your business if you're trying to drive, tech progress and, be a tech enabler. But you have to become really proficient with the tech stack so that you know how to maximize time and deliver value. I always think back to when I went to law school. Thankfully, they had the internet and Google. Don't think I would have got through it otherwise without that. But I remember when I started out in private practice, and it was the day of, I'm showing my age here, it was the day of dictaphones. And you do this letter, you do this advice, and your partner would record stuff on the dictaphone and leave it on your chair. And I remember even at that time thinking, I don't want to work this way. If this is my career for the next 20 years, I don't want to do this. It's really not fun. It's not effective. I don't feel like I'm learning. This is not what I want to do. And one of the reasons I went in-house, I did about 5 or 6 years in private practice, was because I wanted to see if there was a different way to do things where you could change stuff. And I never looked back when I did. But you have a real opportunity to drive things and take the learnings from other functions. I always look at what marketing's doing, what's technology doing. How they work is so different to how traditional legal training tells us to work.
You sound like you're someone that has got and you've done work with InView in the past about the benefits of embracing technology, and it seems like a real passion point for you, which I think is amazing because it is out there. And it's even someone said to me today, like, just taking some time to see new updates on your Microsoft suite, like what updates have come up that you're not embracing, like as simple as that. Like, you don't even need to be like a massive expert, but just staying up to speed with updates as they come through, because there might be something in there that can make your life or one task just slightly easier, which I think is such a good point. And it made me think I just always ignore those updates and I should really start looking at them.
ChatGPT has made my life so much easier. It can just, helps you gives you recipes for ingredients you have left over. It's just amazing. I'm like, how did I deal with life before that?
Yeah. Oh, so that's a great idea. I've never thought to do that. So while we're on the ChatGPT AI topic then, how do you see that impacting the legal profession, or maybe not impacting, but how do you see it benefiting or not benefiting the legal profession?
I think with generative AI, generally like ChatGPT, it can give you a starter for 10. It can. So we all know about the risks, call those out early. We know that, there's hallucinations. You've got to recheck the data. You need humans in the loop, all of that stuff. But it gives you a starter for 10. So you're not starting from a blank canvas. You can then test it, iterate on it, change things. It just helps you ideate better. Because again, you're not starting from a blank canvas. So we're already seeing, the huge impact AI is having in every part of, society at the moment, particularly legal profession, which is, ripe for disruption. I think that if you're interested in it, and if you're not, we really need to start learning how these technologies work, what they can do, playing around with them. Because if you don't play with all the different tech tools out there, you don't know. And then how do you advise your business if you don't understand how they work, what the risks are? So I think it is such an interesting area that's evolving so fast, where all the regulatory goalposts are changing. We're going to get an avalanche of regulation coming. It's just such an exciting time to be looking into that space. And if you're a privacy, data, or tech lawyer, I think everyone needs to become one. Going, there's just so much opportunity.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned it before, but the conversation you had with a colleague who was a GC saying, "I don't want to think about AI until next year." What is the risk there of just saying, okay, next year we'll embrace AI, but not this year?
I think so. There are different ways to embrace it, and it really depends on your business model, your risk tolerance, and all of that. All of those good things. I think not understanding how large language models work is so important, because if you're in a business that's not mature, so if I give an example, like AI is not a magical solution. You can't wave a wand and it's not going to fix all your business processes and problems. You need to do a lot of prep work to get your business ready to use AI. So you need ethical governance frameworks, both at a model level and at an enterprise level. You need to have your data in a structured way before you can put AI over it. So, you can't put a large language model over data if your data is an unstructured mess. You will get useless output because the data is terrible. That takes time. So I think one of the challenges is to enable your business to be able to run with the business as a legal function. The more you just kind of say, I don't have time for that now, when they need you to switch stuff on tomorrow, that gap's going to be really hard to fix, because you're dealing with your learning, your upskilling, as well as trying to help a business that wants to run. So, and I think as lawyers, we have ethical obligations to do the best things by our client. I think it is incumbent on us to stay across these things and to advocate for them, and to help a business operationalize guardrails. You can't do that if you don't know what the actual risks are in technology that's constantly changing.
Yeah, it's not to sound like scared, but it is like, I guess, a little bit alarming when you think of that. If you are a business that is maybe not as sophisticated with their technology, of the mountain that there may be to climb coming soon. And I guess the more you can do now, the better, to kind of just bring down that gap a little bit. I've heard you throughout our conversation, you've talked a lot about, the importance of looking after your team, looking after yourself, like the person has to come first. I would love for you to share with us a little bit in terms of how you make that a priority for yourself and your team. I think, everywhere I look, people are saying it's a tough economic climate, and we've talked about that, but there's an impact on people through that as well. And so I'd just love for you to share a little bit in terms of how you check in and make sure your team and yourself are looking after themselves.
So I'm very lucky. I think I work, KPMG has a really great culture that's very focused on well-being. It's very inclusive, and, people are at the core of our business. I'm also very lucky. I have an amazing legal team, which we genuinely care about each other. Everyone's looking out for, are you going okay? Do you have capacity? If you're absolutely under the pump, what can I take to ease that from you? We over communicate. We talk every day. Some of us are remote. We're constantly on IMs. We're always checking in with each other. both from a work and a general life perspective, because we have to bring our whole selves to work. We all have lives. You know, if you've got a sick child, or you're not feeling well, whatever, that impact stuff. So I think just being really human first is so important, both from a commercial and from a human perspective. It is meshing that together. So I think checking in, I think as a leader, being really clear about what priorities are. One of the frustrations I see in a lot of in-house teams is that lawyers will talk to me and say that my leader will say to me, I want you to put yourself first, and I want you to, make sure you get enough sleep, don't work these crazy hours, all of this. But then they keep saying to me, everything's still due. Nothing's changing. And you have a disconnect there, because you want the person to put themselves first and look after themselves, but the list of things to do has not changed. So I think as a leader, you have to sit down with your team and prioritize and have those tough conversations with the business and renegotiate deadlines and make it work for everybody. Because and I've made this mistake in the past, if you keep expecting everyone to work at the pace of how you have to work when it's, fight or flight mode, that is not sustainable. It's not sustainable for you. It's not sustainable for your team. And, that creates a really not great culture. So just being really close to that. And I'm always trying to, every week I take a step back going, right, has it been a really heavy week? Do people need to have a bit of a lighter week next week? Has this been, how is that going? There will always be peaks and troughs. And, by nature, our work is you have to be responsive. You're unfortunately dealing with things when they go wrong a lot. So you've got to step in and help. You can't be like, nah, I've logged off, I'm done. But how do we spread that? How do we make sure that we're really cognizant of that it's not compounding? So we're not doing months and months of this. It might be a week, it might be a couple of days, but then you have time to kind of just, relax a little bit and get back on track. Because it does take a human toll when you're doing, highly stressful work at high pace.
Yeah, and it is the reality of, I think, the job of a lawyer is, like you say, it's usually when things go wrong that you are needed. Unfortunately, there is obviously more proactive work, but a lot of it is reactive. Something's happened and you need to respond quickly, and it is a higher stress situation, like you say. For you and your kind of like learnings and development, where do you look to, and what are you focusing on to learn and grow in this year?
I think for me, technology is a personal passion of mine, and there's so much to learn. Like, I can't keep up with the pace of how much things are changing, how much I need to get across, let alone all the laws and regs that are coming our way. So that is a huge focus for me. I think it's going to really change the nature of work, the nature of in-house lawyering, and trying to support and guide teams through that. Like, I love I do a lot of coaching, a lot of mentoring in my role. I want to make sure that we're making our people future fit, because I think the challenge for organizations is not so much technological, it's organizational. How do you get your business and your people ready to deal with all this change in general? How do you upskill them? How do you support them? So I think that the people side of things is really interesting to me, and something I'm quite passionate about. How do we make this enjoyable and not so scary for everyone? How do we take some of the fear language out of it? Because you hear a lot of fear across everything these days, but particularly when it comes to tech's going to take over our lives, it's going to get rid of humans, all this stuff. And I think that's not a helpful dialogue at times, because the fear then stops people wanting to change or wanting to dabble. So I think just taking the fear out of it and being like, this is a new thing. It's a new tool. We've history tells us that, humans adapt to things really well if we're given the tools and the support systems to do that.
Yeah. I think I'm guilty of it myself. I use that fear language, and it's not helpful, but I need to think of a different way to like phrase and talk about the change, the market, because it's not helpful using this, but that's all we see. So you kind of just absorb that, and that's the train that we all keep going on. And I think it's a hard one to just stop yourself, but just like it's that, like you said at the start, it's just a mindset shift, and I guess looking at it as a positive and being excited by the challenge, rather than like, oh no, that's too much. We'll just steer well away from that. You're a legal leader. You've worked, private practice, Australia, you're in New Zealand now. What do you think in your journey has been, what is the key element of your role as a legal leader, do you think, if you had to pick one?
I think it's leading people. It's people leadership, and it's people leadership through in a very dynamic, kind of complex world on so many levels. I think navigating change, taking people on that journey, making things land, supporting people enough, and it really comes down to that, because all the technology in the world does not change the fact that people are at the core of our societies, our businesses, our teams, everything. And helping people deal with so much complexity is really hard, because I think as our world progresses, the problems just become more complex. There's so much noise. It's really hard to separate fact from fiction. There's so much stuff. Technology is great, but it's also resulted in information overload, and trying to decipher that, what's accurate, what's not. How do I focus on getting across the stuff that is important, not all the noise, is really hard. So I think kind of navigating through that, I think that's where I see sort of, I guess, where I feel like I can add the most value.
No, I really like that. And for you, and from a career perspective, where you've kind of, when you get to the GC level, like what is it that you would love to do in your career next? What's the next challenge that or are you just really happy with where you are and that's where you want to stay for a while? Not necessarily like moving jobs, but is there like another skill set or something there that you're wanting to add to your toolbox?
I think I love to learn. That's a real driver for me. I love to learn. I love to learn from different people. I love to learn from different industries. I love to learn about new things, about new technologies. So for me, what drives me is always that love of learning. I never want to be somewhere where I feel like, I kind of feel like I know everything now. I'm getting a bit bored. I don't feel like I'm getting challenged or pushed. So that's my driver. And I think, I'm really lucky where I am at the moment. There's no 2 days are the same. There is such a huge breadth and depth. And there's lots of opportunities to do. Most of my role is not purely legal. Like it's very much business problem solving. It's very commercial. It's very, people leadership. And I love that, because you can bring all those things that, I am passionate about and kind of merge that together. And you can really create your own path. And I think whatever role you're in, you want to be creating a path that aligns to your values as well, because if there's a big disconnect between your values and what you're doing, you're not going to be super happy about it. So I think I just try and be really mindful about, does this align to what I want to do, something I'm passionate about, that I'm enthusiastic about, that I feel I can help people with. And as long as that continues, I think that's kind of my drive. I don't feel like I answered that question very well, but I like to learn and want to keep learning, would be my short answer.
No, I think that's really, because I think as well, like it's like you get to GC and it's what's next, but it's like you say, as long as you're continuing to learn about things and grow, like the title doesn't actually matter too much. It's all about the value you get from the work you do and how you feel in your role. So I think that's perfect. I think it's a nice way to think about it as well. It's less about the job title and more about what you do in your day-to-day and what you're learning. Yeah. I've just loved speaking with you, Seshani. Thank you so much. You've got such a positive outlook, and I think it's a really refreshing mindset shift that I think we should all try embrace a bit more as we go through this year and into next year as well. So thank you so much for coming and chatting. I will put a link to your LinkedIn profile if anyone wants to connect and pick up any pieces of this conversation after they listen to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Emma. It's been lots of fun.
Oh, cool. Thank you. If you enjoyed listening, please hit follow and leave us a review on your listening platform of choice. We love engaging with our community and hearing from you, so please head to inview.lawview.com. Thank you so much for tuning in.